Fire isn't just an element. Fire is an organism.
This is your second time executive producing a television series, formerly with Blackbird, of course, and you worked with Apple TV and Dennis on that project. How did the lessons you learned on that project influence your preparation for Smoke?
That's such an interesting question. I think, wow. Do you mean as an actor or as an
actor, creative, or even just like a leader on set?
Well, I think when you're a producer on a show, I think you have a responsibility to hopefully be a good leader on set and to be a positive energy on set and an energy that kind of makes people feel glad to be at work, I hope. I don't know necessarily that I felt there were a ton of things that happened on Blackbird that I really took with me into Smoke, other than I feel I know what Dennis is going for. And from the moment I first read the scripts for Blackbird, which would have been in 2020, I really felt I understood his tone and I understood the psychology that interests him, and that feeling only grew coming into this process of Smoke. Also, I think Dennis understood me as an actor at that point and the kind of things that I was interested in exploring, and thankfully there's a lot of crossover there. So when he came to me and said, you know, here's this new thing, what do you think of this? It was just an incredible opportunity. This is just such an incredible character and an incredible opportunity for an actor. That, to be honest, you know, a lot of my feelings around it have been slightly plagued by a feeling of imposter syndrome, because, you know, I always said to Dennis when, you know, I was like, this is something Gary Oldman would do and he's my hero, you know, and I don't know what Gary Oldman would do, but it felt like a Gary Oldman part to me, and that was really exciting. I'm not comparing myself to him, but I would, you know, his is one of the careers that I most admire and would seek to emulate.
Michelle is a bit of a complicated character, so to speak. Everyone on the show is very complicated and layered, and she's got a bit of moral gray area that she's operating in. Can you talk to me about working with Dennis specifically when it came to developing how you wanted Michelle to appear on screen?
Great question. Yes, she does struggle with some moral ambiguity. You know, he said to me early on, he said, Jurnee, everyone says they want to be happy, and yet why are we drawn to the very thing that will destroy us? And that is an element of Michelle, you know, where she's in this pattern of destruction and creation. When you meet her, she's literally destroying her house in order to rebuild it. And, you know, she's demoted because she's having an affair with her boss, who leaves his wife for her, only for her to say, partner, I'm out. You know, I don't want to, that sort of intimacy I can't do. And so why is she in this pattern of self-sabotage? And I think it's a very relatable thing that I know I can relate to, you know, in human beings, where we say we want one thing and yet we do something completely different.
I was just talking with Ntare and he mentioned, you know, it's like a roller coaster. It just like you make one bad decision and it leads to the next, and you feel you're so far gone from it that even if you don't want to be making those decisions anymore, you feel like you're so far removed from when you were pure, if you will. You mentioned obviously the relationship with Steven in the show, a relationship that doesn't happen in terms of intimacy, but it feels like there's something there, is Michelle and Dave.
Yes.
And Dennis had said in the press notes, I remember, that wasn't something that was on the page, but yourself and Taron kind of brought it out of those characters.
Really? Okay, I mean, I'll take the credit for it if that's what our creators say. You know, I guess that was our interpretation, because there is this dynamic of them where it's 1 minute, they've got this brother and sister dynamic where you feel like they could rant about sports. And then the next minute, they're, you know, trying to get into each other's heads. And the next minute, there's this weird sexual tension with each other. I think Taron and I really did so much work separately that when we came together, it just felt so invisible and alive. And it was like this living, breathing organism where every take was different and unexpected. So yeah, we did for sure find some unexpected dynamics in those characters.
Freddy is described as a character who is a victim of a calloused society. And I find those characters to always be the most intriguing because he is, you know, reactionary to his circumstances. He wasn't necessarily born with some of these moral flaws. Can you talk to me about what a line like that means to developing Freddy as a character and how it helped you get in his psyche?
Well, thank you for that insightful observation. I think one of the hardest things is I haven't had a personal experience at all connected to what Freddy life had been. I don't know anyone who's gone through anything that he's been through. And so the challenge then was, where do you draw from? And I asked Dennis Lehane, where did this character come from? And he is a master at creating all these psychological thrillers, writing the darkest characters. And I was like, you seem like a normal guy. And he's like, my imagination. The imagination is a springboard. And so that for me became the key was letting my imagination run within the realms and the boundaries that Dennis had created, and seeing what I discovered, what my imagination and creative sparks would come from that.
Yeah, sparks, appropriate for this show. There's a bit of a bipolarity to Freddy too, maybe not necessarily in the actual bipolarness sense, but there are times where you feel fear with him. There are other times where you feel empathy with him. Talk to me about riding that line between those two, when you wanted to bring out the side of, been through 27 foster homes and the fear of, threatening some other characters.
I think there's something about Freddy where there's a void. He's a lonely soul, and his attempt to sort of connect is a cry for help. Everything he does is almost a cry for help, but it's done in a way that's sort of destructive or self-destructive. And when his back's up against the wall, so when you corner a dog or a wounded animal, you will see fight or flight. And that's, I think, what's happened with Freddy. He becomes this one extreme or the other, where you feel terrified of what he might do physically, threatening, and incredible empathy where you want to just hug him and, comfort him. So that, I think, is an actor's dream, to be able to play all those extremes. Yeah.
I want to start by asking about Dennis Lehane, obviously the one who scribed this project. I know both of you are fans of his going into this. Reading his books versus reading his screenplays, does it feel like one consistent voice, or does it feel like he's, when he's writing something for the screen specifically, does it feel different from a book?
Well, I had worked with him on Blackbird, and I felt like that show kind of really had a novelist touch to it. Great characters, and made the world, the television journey of serial killing something so exceptional. And, this is obviously dealing in a different world. Arson, which I do feel like is an exotic and unusual crime. So to kind of find a way to bring the audience into that is no small feat. I mean, that really takes, I think, some great writing, and ultimately, that's kind of the through line of the story. But each of these characters in this series are, it's populated by these people who have a lot of duality and a lot of, they all are in different ways drawn to things that hurt them. And I felt like the overall journey was as always, great. He's great as a novelist. He's great as a show creator.
Rafe, let's talk about Steven a little bit here. The history with Michelle obviously is a driving force for his character arc, and he's a character that comes with a lot of vulnerability. Could you kind of talk to me about the dynamic that Steven has with Michelle and how that influenced said vulnerability?
Yeah, I think that Dennis has spoken about this as a cast of characters that are obsessed by things that ultimately kill them. And Steven is obsessed by Michelle. And that, from his point of view, is a very noble pursuit. And I think, again, it speaks to the ambiguity of these characters, is that from the outside, from the point of view of the audience, we might have ideas on who's good and who's bad. But even though Steven does bad things, he believes he's a good guy. And he believes that he's justified in everything that he does. He thinks he's a man of absolute nobility. I think it's quite often a trope in culture and in real life, the man who won't leave his wife for his lover. He doesn't do that. He follows through. He says he does exactly what he says he's going to do, and he gets slapped in the face for it, and it really, really hurts him. So even though he's driven to do things that are morally questionable, he thinks in his mind they're all coming from a good place, which is love, ultimately. He really loves her and believes that they should be together. and it leads to some problems. But the whole cast is full of people like that who think they're doing the right thing, but the audience might have different ideas.
And Greg, a quite opposite dynamic is the one that Harvey has with Dave. There's a bit of a brotherhood there, despite the fact that you play his boss, which is always a fine line to ride between professional and personal. Talk to me about developing that dynamic, especially given the nature of who we know Dave becomes.
Well, funny enough, that when in Blackbird, Taron and I didn't really work together, and in this show, it was great because we had like actual scenes together, and moreover had to build out a long-standing friendship. And you're right. I mean, it is a fine line because I'm his boss, but at the same time, he's somebody who I trust, I believe in, and have faith in. And I think all of that is obviously stress tested in a very, very big way and a dynamic way throughout the show. And Harvey is kind of the last one to believe what others believe. And it was great fun to ultimately give him the benefit of the doubt, but I won't go much further than that.
You seem a little off.